Hi, everybody. Welcome to Boomerang Theater Company. My name is Tim Errickson. I am the Artistic Director of the Boomerang Theater Company. And today on Artist Chats, we have Lori Elizabeth Parquet. Hi.
Hey.
Bouncing around.
Hey.
Lori Elizabeth Parquet is an actor, director, playwright, teaching artist, originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, and is now based in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. She was the 2019 recipient of the New York Innovative Theater Awards. Oh, there it is. 2019 recipient of the New York. Let me try that again. She was the 2019 recipient of the New York Innovative Theater Award for Outstanding Actress for Operating Systems with Flux Theater Ensemble. So that's you're the belt holder. You're the reigning champ.
Until.
Right. If there's no more theater, you get to be the reigning champ forever. Undefeated.
Truly, that's so crazy. I honestly hadn't thought about that until you said it. So that is kind of wild and beautiful for what it is.
Yes, it lasts forever.
Yeah.
So how you doing?
I'm good. Like I said, I went into Manhattan for the first time yesterday. And honestly, that was a thing. Like literally, I was like, I'm feeling anxious about getting on the train.
Yeah.
And I was headed to Midtown. So I was like, you know what, I'll just ride my bike. I take long rides all the time. It'll be no problem. But going over the bridge, I literally just felt my body reacting to the difference of activity. Like I hadn't left Brooklyn in months. I hadn't gone over the Manhattan Bridge in months, and like I hadn't been that high up in the air in months. And my body has just become super sensitive since quarantine began, and I felt it. Like I felt all of that crossing the bridge and then landing. The Manhattan Bridge like spits you out right in Chinatown, and it was like cars, people, Manhattan energy that I just hadn't felt in so long. And it was a lot. It was a lot of feelings as I rode into the city, and I passed like just behind the public who I do teaching artist work for. And it was like, wow, I haven't seen that building in a long time, haven't been over here in so long, and just was feeling all of that. And then Manhattan just has a very different feel than Brooklyn does. So I just absorbed a lot of energy yesterday and exerted a lot of energy yesterday.
You did, yeah.
And I'm feeling it today. So right now I just feel kind of like I did a thing yesterday and it really affected me in a way that I didn't expect. And so I'm tired, feeling a little drained, and like processing that, and just feeling some feelings came back anew in terms of like mourning the end, like the temporary pause on our industry, which I had kind of like pushed down in the last couple months. All that kind of came back up, riding through downtown near the public, and then also in Midtown, like seeing all those theaters closed. It was just kind of like,
yeah. And we're taping today on Thursday, August 6th. And
wow.
we had like a tornado / hurricane / tropical storm like 2 days ago.
Which, being a girl from New Orleans, I was fine with that. Like it actually was super comforting for me and felt like a cleansing, the storm did. And I was able to like really air out my apartment in like a deep way because like the winds were just whipping, and I was like, I opened up all the windows and like cracked my front door, and just wind was just moving through here, which felt good because, I've been home so much in the last 4 or 5 months, with just my energy and all the things. So it felt really nice. I was thankful for Isaiah's clear some of that out.
So we had that on Tuesday. Yesterday, when you were riding into Manhattan, it was 90 some degrees and like sunny.
It was so bright. It was part of, my like sensitivity to like being outdoors and like taking that trip into the city was how bright it was. It was like intense, and it was hot. It was hot.
Yeah. So are you tired today?
Yeah.
Yeah, like physically tired, right? Like just
physically tired, but also energetically. I saw all kind of characters in Manhattan. Characters we don't really have in Brooklyn. I mean, there are other characters in Brooklyn.
I was going to say. Yeah.
but you know, literally, and I think she'll be fine saying this. I met up with Alicia Spielman out there, and we saw this guy that had like, I don't know if they were safety pins or just metal bars all through and across his face. So like, take some flesh, put a metal bar through it, but 100 of those across his face, and I was like,
yeah, get me back on the bridge. I'm coming back. Forget this.
Exactly. But also just like seeing the number of homeless people, like it just was a lot, just being back in the city, and Times Square was not as empty as the pictures I had seen over the quarantine. And so that was kind of shocking. I mean, still grossly, you know, diminished from where it was pre-COVID, but it was all just a really strange experience, honestly. But it's still kind of linked today.
With all of this going on, how has isolation and sort of quarantine and everything else sort of been for you while you've been in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights?
You know, it really had phases. I would say, like, I did not feel isolated for some time, mainly because I was in so much communication with all kinds of people late March, early April, when we were all just kind of trying to find our way through this. I mean, I was on the phone, whether it was with people from home. All of my family lives in New Orleans, so literally I was just getting calls every day about hearing about folks who were in ICU and on ventilators and just all of that. And then my life here in New York, you know, actors checking in on each other, friends checking in on each other. I was physically alone, but I was not alone. So like I did not feel like that isolation feeling and until maybe like May, June, honestly. Like it took some time before I felt like, okay, things have slowed down. Like I was like, there was a moment where in early April, I was like, I'm not working and yet my days are still full. Like what's going on? Like I'm the kind of person who needs a lot of time alone to recharge and refuel. And it was really strange to be physically alone, but not be alone. And I really wasn't like that. Those first, I would say 6 weeks of quarantine where I would wake up and just be in communication with all kinds of people. And so I didn't really experience like, okay, we're in this, or I'm feeling a little bit isolated until maybe May or June. And that was good. Like I was looking forward to that. Like I wanted to have that feeling so that I could, it takes time for me to like, you know, I'm an Aquarius. And so I'm very like, not that like I'm detached from my like emotional world, but it just takes me longer to get there and access it. So, and I need time and space to do that. And I started to get that, I would say around late May, June. And then that section of quarantine became all about like dealing with some stuff that was like 15 years old that had just been buried. And because of, you know, the culture of our industry and the grind culture of capitalism and just all the things, you just go, you live your life, you work your jobs, you go to your gigs, you do your things, and you just don't address what's going on with you. And, you know, once June hit, I was certainly like, whoa, I'm having memories come up. I'm having experiences like resurface and, you know, reflect back to me emotional spaces I've been in the past and didn't acknowledge. And now I'm like just dealing with and sitting with. And so I had to really be patient with myself because a lot of it was difficult. Just being like, wow, that really happened. And I just kept trucking and didn't really process it, you know. So June was a lot of that. And it was positive ultimately because I was able to work through a lot of things and like find some clarity, like spiritually and emotionally. And it's still happening, you know, this is not a a journey that will end really, truly. But I realized like, wow, this kind of work takes time, and you have to have the time to do it. And so I was thankful. And now, what are we? We're in August now.
Yeah.
July. Like, it's wild. June and July and now August have, New York started opening back up, and I started getting more invitations to like come out and be in the world. And I was like, I am not ready. One, because I don't want COVID, but also two, I'm like in like a deep kind of incubation cocoon phase of like self-exploration.
Yeah. And so how does that, as a creative person, as a person who makes things and writes things, and how has that process affected being a creative person during all this?
I honestly have not been concerned with being a creative person until about the last month and a half or so. Like from March all the way through, like I said, June, July, it was, responding to the traumatic events at the time. Like I was not wearing my artist hat. I was doing work. I was in readings. We remounted the Honeycomb trilogy. We did all kinds of, I was doing all kinds of things, but it was weird how I was able to, I won't say I what's the word I'm looking for? I won't say I was like disassociating, but like I was doing them and I'm like talking into a camera, and then I turn it off, and then like I'm back in my body and I'm back in my inner world. And that world was not about being an artist or thinking creatively. And then May hit, and George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, like all of that, it just like being an artist in the way that I had related to it before COVID just wasn't on my radar. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. I just wasn't thinking about it that way. It was just like, how am I surviving this mentally, emotionally, and then spiritually, in terms of all of the racial unrest that we started to see at the end of May. Yeah. So creatively, I feel like only now am I starting to think like, okay, and part of it is because work is coming. Now we have pivoted. The industry is figuring out how to still develop new plays and still get things heard and made. And it meant that I had to come out and engage with my artist self. And that's been great too, because a lot of it is directly now connected to all the things that are happening with us socially and politically. Yeah.
It's going to be a wild couple of months coming up from here straight through to the election and into the end of the year, both from a social justice standpoint, from a political standpoint, from a disease and isolation, and the arguments of schools and opening up and closing back down, and sports opening up and closing back down, like all these things. It's just going to be a wild 6 months.
Yeah. And if 2020 has taught me anything, is that anything is possible. Like I actually can't predict it.
Yeah.
And I've got like a bunch of teachers in my family, and that has been like a main point of conversation. The other thing that has gotten me through quarantine is that my family has a weekly Zoom meeting that happens on Sundays, every Sunday. And it's like my immediate family, which is just 5 of us, but then also their partners, their children, my uncles, cousins. Like it's a thing, and it happens every Sunday, 2:00. And it was a lifesaver for me, honestly. It was one, how I was like marking the time. We've not skipped one. It always happens. And it's just, they gave me life, because, these are the people who know me best. And like, we're all going through this thing collectively. And
so did that wasn't on the table before COVID and all that, right?
It was a new thing. And that was also the beautiful part about it, was being able to like connect to family in that way. And we're a close-knit family in general, but this was like a weekly check-in was kind of transformative for our family. And it has been transformative in how we function, how we relate to each other. And so I'm thankful to that, because it's helped our family grow.
So did you have somebody who, my family are all technophobes for the most part, right? Like
Really?
my dad was asking the other day, so how he can get Zoom on his phone because he might have to talk to one of his buddies. And he was like, I was like, it's pretty easy. And he was like, I don't know. So I could just imagine like, the start of the Zoom call with people that don't necessarily know how Zoom works. I had a conversation with my mom and her boyfriend like 4 years ago when we first got FaceTime. And I was like, okay, here it is. And what they did is they took the phone and thinking that they were on speakerphone, just hit it and then just put it in the middle of the table facing straight up. So for 15 minutes, I was trying to convince them that they had to pick the phone up and not shoot the ceiling fan that was just spinning around. So I am very, very jealous of your technologically proficient family.
Everyone's proficient, but we got there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the first few, I could only see the top of my father's head. It was like, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it became a thing, and I think that's like at a certain point, that's all he wanted to show us was this much. So it's like, I think you know how to move the camera at this point, but it was a choice by then.
Yeah. So now that, as you were starting to get back into the sort of the creative things that we do, and the industry is sort of being more available to us, how are you able to still be a creative person in your apartment without, being in a rehearsal room or seeing other people? Do you have a particular time of day that you like to write, or do you have a particular spot in your apartment you want to run lines, or?
I don't have a time of day or place in my home where I write. I haven't written anything on paper all the time.
Sure. But up here.
Oh yeah. Lots of stuff is happening up here, but nothing has been put to paper, though I do have a deadline, August 13th. So there will be
some I'm wasting your time right now.
Yeah. But honestly, I had stepped away from it all. I remember I'm trying to remember what it was that I was working on, and it was a Zoom reading. I just don't remember what it was. And I had the thought, I was like, whoa, I haven't warmed up my voice in months, like just as a practice, when that was something that I was doing daily, because any class that I teach, I lead a warm up. Any rehearsal that I run or am a part of, I'm warming up. And that just hadn't happened since March 14th. And I noticed it in May. I think that was, I noticed that I was like, wow, like I just did this whole reading and I feel my voice, and I feel that I didn't warm it up properly to do this whole thing. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, those practices are good for me, period. Not just for the room and not just for those purposes, but just in general. Now ask me if I've done a warm up since after I had that revelation. The answer is no, but but when I am getting ready to perform, I now warm up. It's like, before I would just hop on the Zoom, do the thing, act for the tiny little camera and go about my business. But now I realize that, all of it is better. The work is richer. I feel better afterwards. If I just literally commit to my practice, And that's the thing about having a practice, is you will be knocked off of it. And it's about being able to just get it back on track,
And not freaking out that you missed something, or like, being easy on yourself a little bit too. Like, yeah, I'm sure you've got that figured out, but I know, like, for me, sometimes if I just beat myself up for like, I didn't work out today, what an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, or I didn't get my pages in, or like whatever,
That's all part of the routine, but that was also some of the stuff that I was trying to, some of those patterns that I was trying to break in that like self-reflective part of quarantine that I had gone through. And the lesson I took from that was that, like, yeah, I should always be gentle with myself. I should always be easy with myself. And I should not speak so harshly to myself, because it affects us on a cellular level. It affects our ability to be more open to the work. So that was a lesson that I got out of quarantine, actually, in terms of creative process, is that, like, it's super important to be gentle with oneself.
Yeah. When you find yourself at an impasse, whether it be writing and you're blocked, or you're directing a scene and you can't get exactly what you're looking for, or even as an actor, I know, like, if you've been asked to push further and you're hitting a block that you can't, is there anything that any piece of advice that you fall back on, or any words of wisdom that sort of you fall back on to help you get through, like, and keep going?
It's interesting with I'm very much like a all things will be revealed to you in time kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to writing, I've done the thing of like, it's 10 a.m. It's time to sit at the computer and look at the blank page.
Yeah.
And I just had to learn that I'm not that person and give myself permission to not be that person. So, I was given the opportunity to direct a 10-minute play as a part of a virtual festival for Tulane University for their fall semester. And as a director, and my contact there was like, I see that you write as well. Would you be interested in writing your own piece and then directing it? And I was like, wow, that's, I've never done that. Look at 2020 giving new opportunities. I was like, you know what? Yes, that's I'll do that. So in one fell swoop, I was agreeing to write a thing and then direct it. So now I got to like write something that will work for Zoom, and I have not even opened Microsoft Word. You know what I mean? Like, my process is very much like, it will come. When you know what you want to write, it will come. So I really don't stress feeling stuck. Like, I had been thinking, like, what am I going to write for this thing? What am I going to write for this thing? The only, stipulation was that they wanted it to address the socio-political things that are happening right now. So one, that could be a wide range of things. And two, I have so many thoughts and feelings around all of the different things that are happening now. So one could say that I'm stuck or I have like a block right now, but I don't view it that way. I view it as my spirit has not yet been moved to express a thing. And that's, and it will come. Like, that has been my process every time, and it comes. So like, but that's different than with directing. Directing gives me so much anxiety. Like, low key, I don't love it because of the anxiety that it gives me. But that anxiety is only around, I have no control over what happens up on that stage once I birth it, or once I help birth it with everyone else that's on the team, and so that just drives me nuts. But with directing, it's kind of different. I feel like when there's like a moment that isn't working with directing, my go-to thing is like getting back to basics. If there's a moment with an actor and it's not sizzling, it's like, all right, don't call anyone else the next day. Me and this person got to get into it, and we got to go back to like literally just go back to basics. And we might be in week 3.5 of rehearsal, and tech might be in 5 days, but that's also the time that it's probably best to go back to the basics, so that everyone is clear on where it is we're trying to get to, before we throw in all those other elements. And so when it comes to directing, my go-to thing is go back to the basics. Who, what, where, when, why. Why is my big question. Anyone who's been in a room with me knows I ask a lot of questions as actor, as director, but particularly when I'm the actor in the room.
Yeah.
My process is just about asking so many questions. Some directors love that, others don't. It all leads to good work, I think. It's not wasted time. I'm a huge, huge fan of table work. And there's so many conversations around like restructuring the rehearsal process and even tech and all that stuff while we're in this pause. And I would love it if one of the things that came out of like how we mount a production is that, one, we get more rehearsal time, because I think time around the table is so important, especially given the content of certain plays around identity and socio-political things. Like, one, we have to understand the issues at hand, and then we have to understand the people around the table and their, not even as characters, just as the humans and the actors themselves, their relationship to these issues, because all of that is gonna be present on some level when we dive into these characters. So like, being around the table is super important for me. So important that we will go back to it in week 3 of rehearsal if a moment isn't working. And then it works, you know, like I have, it's just, that's my go-to move when it comes to directing. And then with acting, so writing, it'll come to me. Directing, go back to basics. And with acting, it's interesting. And it's so weird to think of it now because I haven't been in a room with actors in so long, physically. Like, I'm kind of like, what happens when I get stuck as an actor?
Maybe you don't.
I mean, I can't say that.
I don't know. I mean, you are the belt holder right now. I mean, like, you know.
Well, listen, that play, I was just primed. One, it was written for me. Corinna wrote the play with members of Flux in mind. So the entry point was just super clear, and all I had to do was go in there and just fill in those spaces. But with other things, like, honestly, it's really just about tapping into, like, I'm a big, like, I believe in empathy. And when it's me doing the performing, I really just tap into, like, my practice around empathy and trying to understand a moment, not just from my character's point of view, but all of the other characters' point of view, to help shape how my character might be existing in this given situation. I mean, that sounds real basic what I'm saying, but like, it's just the truth, you know, like, yeah. I kind of had to take a step back and go, you know, why does this character feel this way about what has occurred? Yeah. Not my character, the ones that, you know, my character speaks to. And that just helps resituate me. It's all about I think the biggest theme of as I'm speaking is just going back to basics is what works for me.
I have a question that is very specific to your career, because I think that one of the things that has been so interesting to watch you in plays for a long time now, right? I think the first time I saw you was Ajax in Iraq. Oh. So that was, I want to say 2008.
11?
Somewhere in there, right? So it's years and years ago, probably a decade ago, just about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so do those questions that you ask when you're in the rehearsal room change for you as you have both aged as a performer, but also gained experience as a performer? Because you play a lot of times high status, right? Like, you come into operating systems and you're in charge. When you're in Am I Dead, you're calling a lot of the shots, right? Like, much more so than when in an ensemble thing like Ajax in Iraq, or some of the other things where you are a piece of a larger mosaic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that those questions that you ask as an actor have changed as the roles you've been given or have been written for you have changed? You are on the spot. You have to answer very succinctly. No, you don't.
I was like, well, that's not going to happen. But
I asked you a very hard question. I admit it.
You know, I would say no, they have not changed. And I say that because the very first play that I did with Flux was Dog Act. Oh, and yeah. I was like the lead in that. And it was just full on, like, page-long monologues, all the things. And my process has always been kind of the same of, like, why this? Why this time? Why this moment? Why this relationship? Like, I'm just remembering and that was a difficult play for me because, one, I was such a young actor. I only been living in New York like I did Dog Act. I auditioned for it at the end of 2010. So I'd only been living in New York really for like 2 or 3 years at that point, and had done very little theater at that time. Flux was the first like artistic home I had in terms of performance. And Kelly O'Donnell, who directed that, will tell you that it was a lot of conversation. And I think she will also tell you she was prone to tell me, let's not think about it, just get up and try. And I there is value in that. Absolutely. But for me, if it doesn't make sense here for me, it's not gonna make sense below the neck. And and a lot of people, you know, one of my pet peeves is when I've heard directors say, actors just love being around the table because, you know, they're scared, they're insecure about getting up on their feet. And I'm like, I don't give actors more credit than that. Yeah. Our job is to make decisions, take risks, and we will do that. But I want to take educated risks, because to me, ultimately, that's more efficient. I'm able to do my job better the more information I have, and the clearer I am on your vision and your understanding of this moment as a director, the better I'm able to execute it. So you know, what I will say in ways that I've grown is becoming more specific around my line of questioning. When any person will tell you, anyone who's worked with me will say, yes, Lori's going to ask a lot of questions. And I think my questions are better now because I understand plays better. I understand dramaturgy better.
You've also been on both sides of that experience now, directing, writing, and acting. So you know a lot.
Exactly. And all of that helps. Directing has absolutely made me a better actor. And acting definitely made me a better director. And all of it has made me an okay playwright. You know, like, I'm such a baby at playwriting that I still don't proudly own or wear that hat yet, but it's still so true. And like, playwriting, honestly, is like, when I first wrote that 10-minute play for The Fire this time, that's when I had the first moment of like, oh, this is why we get line notes, because that is not what I wrote. Like, watching the thing, and I'm like, again, because I have no control, I'm just sitting in the house like, it matters. I put that comma there for a reason, you know, like.
Oh my God, it makes you crazy.
But it also, you know, again, like, deepens my empathy for everyone in the process, because I have to learn as a playwright that if an actor like consistently says a line a different way or consistently flubs on one section, then I have to have enough, you know, lack of ego to go, well, maybe let me look at this line again. So it's really a cool way to grow by wearing all these different hats.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're the best.
Sometimes. Sometimes.
Thank you for doing this. I think this is a great conversation. I think we haven't had anyone on this little, whatever we're calling this stream of consciousness chat show that we're doing, that has been as multi-hyphenate, you know, been seen as many different parts of the production as you have. So
yeah,
I think you're a cool cat.
Thank you. You're a cool cat.
Oh, there's no living with me now. Forget it.
Listen, I mean,
growing. All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. I hope you're doing well and taking care of yourself through all of this.
You too.